I'm talking about, obviously, my experience in the NLC branch. I'm the manager of the branch, and I was asked to look at rethinking our workforce landscape. So I am currently having, let's call them interesting discussions with the HR team, and they are often telling me that, no, we can't pay anthropologists anymore. We're trying to and make sure the NLC is all consistent across the branches. And the thing that she told me in particular was that we now generally across the board expect a high turnover of staff. Therefore, we need to plan for about 3 to 5 years in one position. And then also we are having a flexible workplace. So people are expecting to work from home. They're expecting to perhaps take longer leave, perhaps work part-time. Now, that's all fine, but we definitely work within a yearly cycle. We have a very defined wet dry season. So I'm very happy to be flexible, but obviously the defined dry season, which is March to October, when we do most of our work in terms of out bush, that's when I can be less flexible. The other thing she said to me is, if you want to try and pay your antros more, then one of the things that they would look at is what they call subject matter experts. So I'm increasingly encouraging people into specialisation. So what's the landscape like in anthropology in particular? As you know, and you all know this, there's less teaching of Aboriginal anthropology. Therefore, we need to do more in-house training in the rep bodies. There's this idea that applied anthropology is not real anthropology. As we know, and there's now regular crossover between the Academy and NTRBs. There is a certain amount of southeast urban ideas that working with Aboriginal people is difficult, and all I'd say is going north or west, and I'm including South Australia in that. There's the assumption there's no word for anthropologists. In fact, one of my staff told me she was explicitly told by the University of Adelaide, you can't get any work as an anthropologist. I can tell you we have regular vacancies. We have 21 staff. We're about to recruit 5 more, and I'm just talking about anthropologists. The CLC has about 16. Tiwi Land Council now has 3, and Adelaide Land Council has 1, and then there's about 15 in the Aboriginal Areas Site Protection Authority. So that's 55 staff in the extent, plus the AAPA. Native title is difficult and political, but it's also incredibly challenging and rewarding. And hopefully over the next few days, that will be emphasised. I need to explain the NLC obviously is the largest organisation employing anthropologists in Australia, and that's because we have both the Aboriginal Land Rights Act and the Native Title Act. And in fact, at least 3/4 of our funding comes from the Aboriginal Land Rights Act. So this map really shows you the extent of where the NLC deals with, and all the green regions are what comes under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act, where we have 2/3 of our staff deal under the Land Rights Act. The rest of the country, all the other colours have either been recognised native title or they're in process. So one of the things relevant to this talk is that, for example, if you're working in the BRD, which is towards Kununurra, I don't know, can you see my pointer? No, okay. Anyway, if you're working to the west towards Kununurra, that's a distinctive cultural area. Compared to, for example, northeast Arnhem Land, which is a very again a very distinct cultural area. So when you're talking about getting people to be able to move on, do different things. One of our staff used to work in VRD. He's now working in North and East Arnhem Land, and it's finding that a different challenge in terms of a new cultural area to really understand and work with. The other thing is that the land and sea country, we now have much greater emphasis on sea country through tidal, of course, but also beds and banks claims and visual zones. And as you know, water rights increasingly a significant issue for Aboriginal people. So that's one area of expertise that we'd be looking at. This just gives you an idea of the structure of our branch. You'll note we have a large GIS team, and we also have a large LIR team, LIR, the Anthropology Library, that supports the anthropology research. You'll see there's a native title team in the process of offering a position to the coordinator of that team, and then we have the northern region and the southern region both have managers for those respective teams. But what I want you to have a look at is to the right, which is senior anthropologist alpha. That's the just forgot for a second what that means, but that's the carbon sequestration project. Then we've got a senior anthropologist for sea country, and our senior anthropologist for parks, Edward Kidner, will start in a couple of weeks' time. Again, here's a good example where he was a regional anthropologist and he did a master's. He went to Europe to do a master's by coursework. He focused on ecology and Indigenous rights, and he came back to us because he realised that Europe really doesn't do much in work management or working with Indigenous people. So we're very happy to welcome him back, and we could place him in a higher level because he had that specialist knowledge. Okay, just to show you, when I first became manager, soon after I started, which was I think last year, was we did an in-house strategic plan, and I haven't spelt out goals 2, 3, 4, but all the staff emphasised staffing and resources and professional development. So this is what is essential to people, and I think this is really the key that we're talking about today. So recruiting, I think we're trying to develop better relationships with the universities, but really the staff networks are often the best way to get new staff, encourage people to come to the NLC. Retaining staff, I think I'm looking at always, as I mentioned, one of our staff going from BRD to North East Arnhem Land, but there's special areas of expertise, specialist matter expert. We have a whole range of things that we're looking to develop. So native title, obviously, but we did that. We're looking at heritage, repatriation, social impact, joint management, sea country, dispute management, economic development, linguistics, etc. So I think that's one of the things I'm emphasising in this little talk, which is there are lots of opportunities, and I think staff really have particular interests, and it's important that we're able to encourage them with that. The other thing staff said is that they often don't have the time to do their own research interests, so I've tried to put in the budget at least some weeks of the year that they can do that. Obviously, they need to advance in the system, and that's where I showed you the structure. And most importantly, just recognising the importance of corporate knowledge and increasing depth of experience. So we want to retain those people who have that corporate knowledge. Right, the specifics of training, we've increasingly done office seminars. So we have our lunchtime seminars, and we often bring in consultants to give us a presentation before they go out or after they go out to the field. Obviously, because we're a large organisation, we have a strong structure which I hope supports less experienced staff. And then here, the AAS and CNTA conferences, and I've put special short courses if suitable, because we had a recent experience where we sent people off to a short course which turned out to be excessively technical and really not suitable for the staff that went. So I think, learned my lesson. I think I'll send one staff to try something out, but there are plenty of other short courses. For example, the Centre in UQ, which gives a course in heritage. Some of our staff have done that online, which I'd certainly recommend that. And then the last thing I'd say is, and I'm looking at everybody from all the other NTRBs, I'm really keen that we have collaboration with other NTRBs. So, for instance, when we've had our in-house presentation, we've invited CLC along in teams. And I also think staff exchanges should be considered. So I had the fortunate experience of going to Nunaburra Council for about a year, based in Alice Springs, and that was just a terrific experience for me. All right, so that's enough from me, just to show you what a beautiful team we have. Not every single person is there, but that was the recent group that got together for a planning workshop. Okay, over to you, Dan. Oh, that's good.
Thanks, Wendy.
All right, so just kind of, I guess, building on what Wendy's talked a bit about, I'm going to talk a little bit about workforce integration, which I guess to me means kind of collaboration, crossover, cohesion. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the structure shift that happened at WIMAC about a year ago. And then also a really exciting program that we implemented last year, which was an internship with Curtin University. And I think, at the end, we can probably do, questions for both Wendy and I and have a bit of a discussion. So obviously just a quick acknowledgement of country, not only for the traditional owners on the lands on which we're meeting today, but also just across Australia and WA, and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. Beautiful picture there of Pilbara country. And for those who kind of don't know much about WIMAC, we are the rep body for the Geraldton region, or the Yamaji region and the Pilbara regions in WA. There's a whole long history of name changing, which I will not go into because it's boring. But essentially, we were incorporated in 1994, and that was for the Geraldton region only. And then in 2000, we actually brought on the Pilbara region as well, which was known as PNTS at that time, Pilbara Native Title Services. And so from 2000, we've represented both those regions. We've had over 40 positive determinations in those regions, and WIMAC has assisted in some capacity in about 36 of those as well. So some of those have been sort of more peripheral, others we've, from the very beginning and taken them right through to consent determination. So this is a little bit of a look at the structure of what is currently the Research Country Culture Services Department. So the RCCS manager, which is my position, now looks after the research team, the heritage team, and also land sea management. So this is not necessarily a new structure. When I started at WIMAC in 2012, it was a research heritage combined structure, and we had an emerging LSM team, or land sea management team, at that time. And then there were some shifts, and we had research sitting under legal, which is quite a common thing that happens in a lot of rep bodies. Although I know in WA, I think there's been a bit of a shift towards research managers and the like actually reporting into CEOs as well. And we had heritage and LSM sitting separately. So for a period of time, heritage sat under finance, which was interesting for them, I'm sure. And Land and Sea Management actually reported directly to the CEO. And then there was another shift, and Land and Sea Management and Heritage sat together with our PDC team in the projects team. So there has been a bit of shifting arrangement, and that's really the nature of the work, the amount of staff that's happened, people sort of coming in and trying to figure out a better way to do things. And I think, one of the things to remember with structure shifts and staffing is that, it takes time to get it right. So kind of this evolving space, it can be difficult as well when you're trying to sort of think about, well, what's going to be the best fit for everyone. So this is what it is now as of last year. And you can see that they're relatively big teams. I mean, I've got the ranges here. The LSM team itself is about 52 people all up. We have casual and part-time rangers that are on country, out in on Yangamata country. We have quite a big heritage team as well. And then we also have the research team too. And as Wendy mentioned, recruitment has been difficult. We've got pretty full teams now. But the last couple of years has been really, really difficult with recruitment, just even trying to get applications in when you advertise, particularly for anthropologists, people that are qualified. And I think, Kevin mentioned this morning that we really are in WA competing with those research companies, consultancy companies as well. We're not in competition with PBCs, but people also choose to go work at PBCs, which I think is really great. And I know that PBCs have their own, issues or concerns as well, and they're also competing with resourcing and mining companies that unfortunately can pay a lot more money than what NTRBs can. But as I think everyone's had these conversations about flexibility, professional development, like Wendy talked about, all of these things that you try to promote working at NTRB to make it a more attractive place to work and having a more kind of collegiate approach to things. So reasons for the shift in structure, the changing nature of work. So I guess the idea of research and legal in the native title space. So, trying to have more of that separation between research and legal, and that kind of independence. So at WIMAC at the moment, one of the things that we're doing is looking at a lot of unclaimed areas, and areas that are, between a lot of determinations, as I know a lot of people are, and doing a lot of in-house research. So the in-house anthros are briefed to do that work. And so the idea of, having more separation of the research team in particular from legal, rather than, say myself as a research manager reporting into a PLO who is then briefing me to do work that's independent, so it was sort of that conversation about how do we move it away? How do we have it so it's a bit more independent and there's no perception of bias, whether it be from claimants or potential claimants, the court, the state, whoever it is. So that was definitely one of the main reasons for that. Also the post-determination space, so that crossover of work for PBCs and different services that we provide. So, working obviously in research, you've got heritage where you've got anthropologists, archaeologists, we have an environmental scientist now as well, and land and sea management where you've got experts and rangers working out on country. There's such a crossover of work, and there's different projects and things where you're working for PDCs where it really makes sense to have everyone working as a team and being able to come in and out of those spaces and be able to talk properly and collaborate better. So that was definitely another driving reason. Team support and collaboration. Again, better support, like-minded professionals, the training. As Wendy mentioned, having in-house training is really important, upskilling. We are also recipients of the Attorney General's Department grant. So we do a lot of in-house training at WIMAC, and a lot of you in the room might know have been to some of our AG sessions. But being able to sort of pull that and be able to try to offer further training, particularly for the heritage team and land and sea management as well. So that's really important, and just being able to sit in the room and talk about your experiences on country, whether you're an anthropologist, an archaeologist, a ranger coordinator, everyone has something to share, and we can all learn from those conversations. And also that kind of feeds into drawing on in-house expertise. So again, if you've got a particular project with a PUC, and you've got, your anthropologist who may know the group and has known the group for 15 years, you've got an archaeologist, an environmental scientist, all these people can actually work together, and you can draw on that expertise internally as much as possible before you have to outsource some of that. And I think as well, the acknowledgement of work, the recognition of the work that anthropologists in particularly in that native title space play, but also all of the work that the teams do. And it's important in that NTRB space, both as the core work, for native title, so resolving claims, compensation, return of materials, but also for PDCs and services as well. It's such a key important role that all of these teams do, and working together, I think, just strengthens that. And, the structure offered a different and more direct seat at the table through, one position managing the three interconnected teams. So sort of having oversight of that, being able to have that interconnectedness as well. So how has it helped or not? So as I said before, it makes sense to have one position with oversight of three linked teams. You've got, people that are working across different projects, 4 PDCs in the heritage space, in the research space, in land and sea management as well. And, the representation on EMT, and then a more direct link to the board. So having, that oversight and being able to know what's going on in those spaces across the teams. Less silos, more cohesion amongst the teams generally, particularly research and heritage, where there is a lot more crossover. Having anthropologists that are sitting in heritage, being able to work perhaps in the native title space, native title anthropologists going out on heritage surveys, that kind of thing. People talking to each other more, project and training collaborations, but it is a continual work in progress. There are different types of work that people are doing in those different teams. So it's not about everything being, exactly the same or having collaboration on everything, because there are still separate roles and responsibilities if you're working as a native title anthropologist, if you're working in heritage, if you're working in land sea management, but where you can, sort of having that crossover. But like anything, it is a continual work in progress, and this structure's only been in place for sort of less than a year. So we are still figuring out how it will work. One of the key things is also consistency across related practices. So fieldwork guidelines with all the work health and safety stuff that we now have to deal with, return of materials, templates, process docs. So particularly with return of materials, return of native title materials is really key, and we've got policies and processes in place, but making sure that, say, a heritage return of materials is consistent with that. You're not doing a completely different thing or having completely different ideas and processes, that it matches where it can, and also land and sea management as well. Particularly, I think with heritage, what we're trying to do now is perhaps do those returns together, a heritage and a native title materials research return, just so that it's a bit more cohesive and a group doesn't have to go through 2 or 3 different types of returns. One of the examples that I've put there as well is Future Act Advice, and the lovely Hugh is in the room here, who has been helping with technical support, who is our Future Acts anthropologist. I won't ask you to say anything, don't worry. But, we started this process with Future Act Advice, where the anthropologist gives advice to legal about exclusion zones for, in particular, tenements. And, needless to say that it was sort of going all over the place. So we developed some forms and processes. And now with heritage in the wider department, we've been able to sort of bring them in a better, more collaborative way, so that, there's one document that's been worked on, people are seeking advice from each other. The research team and the heritage team are actually talking to each other about that tenement, about the exclusion zones, and then that one piece of advice goes back to legal. So I think that's a good example of how some of this has been working. Better understanding of what each team does and why, and how it fits into the bigger picture. So things like use and access of information. One of the things a year ago when we were talking about, what each team does and how native title works and heritage, is that a lot of people didn't understand why in heritage you couldn't, access a connection report and use that information for a heritage survey. So explaining some of the nuances of that, some of the legalities, the confidentiality, so that people think, oh, well, it's not just that, research doesn't want us to have that information. There's actually reasons why some people may not be able to access certain information, or, that you can't use certain information for a different purpose. So I think that's helped people to understand how, some of their roles fit into the bigger picture. And also just, trying to break down some of those silos as well of, why can't we access this? Why can't we look at that? And trying to have a bit more training around that, and understand as well, if you're very new into a space and you don't have a lot of experience in the industry, what is it that a rep body does? And so having some training around that and talking about functions and responsibilities for people who, may come into heritage service provision and haven't necessarily had that background working in a rep body before. Drawing on in-house expertise is easier, as I said before. And I think, one of the key things is knowing what's going on in each space with each of the groups or the PUCs that we work with. So, what's happening on the ground in native title work impacts heritage work. It impacts healthy country planning, ranger coordination. What's happening out on country on a heritage survey impacts what then happens at a native title meeting. So these things are connected and they're related. And if you can know what's going on more broadly in the space, you have a better chance to be able to figure out when issues arise or know what people are talking about when they talk about, something that's happened on country or, if there are politics that are going on as well. And of course, very important, more money in the budget for department. Yeah. So look, structure shifts can be hard and it takes time to get things right, and it's not always right for everyone. And, particularly in research and the Country Culture Services Unit, which I know is a mouthful, we're still learning what will work and, want to continue to learn and adapt where we can. And so that means there's a lot of speaking, a lot of encouraging people to come and have a chat if they're not sure about something or something doesn't make sense. And obviously, trying to make sure that people feel comfortable with the jobs that they're doing and their reporting lines. I just want to go back quickly to the structure, because talking about sort of flat structures before, which Wendy mentioned, is that whilst in the LSM team and also the research team, we've had that kind of structure for a while, heritage for a really long time was a completely flat structure. So there was a heritage manager and everyone reported into that. So one of the things that we also did with the structure shift was actually looking at how you can have those senior positions and those team lead positions in there, and that idea of succession planning. So succession planning and career progression is really important. I think everyone, feels the same about that. So by creating a bit of a more tiered structure, you have that opportunity. Also, one of the other things that I think is really great, and it's it's a new thing, but hopefully it will start to happen more, is perhaps easier crossover. Obviously working on projects together is one thing, but if people want to move across into the heritage team, if people want to move across into the LSM team, there might be better opportunities as those positions arise for people to be able to kind of go sideways, which is also another way of retaining staff, getting to do something different, like when we talked about at NLC. At the moment, we actually do have a senior anthro who's on secondment to a PUC. And so that's been really great as well, giving them a bit of a break from some of that native title stuff, moving in and helping a group, while they get set up with all of their processes and policies and projects. So I'm just going to finish by talking briefly about our internship program with Curtin University. So this really came out of everything that happened with UWA and then kind of scrapping anthropology. I heard yesterday, strangely enough, that apparently that is changing. I don't know if anyone else has heard about that they are offering more anthropology units. There's a big resurgence. David might have something to say about that. So I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. So I'm keen to know more about that, but we'll see. But essentially, we partnered with Curtin University because they were increasing their sort of humanities social science department. There are a number of UWA staff, anthropological, sociological staff that went over to Curtin. And so we wanted to implement an internship program for third year anthro or history students who had an interest in native title or Indigenous studies, with the idea that we can give some insight into what it means to work in native title, what the opportunities are, that idea of career pathways. So promoting the fact that, there is still a lot of work in native title. There's a lot of work in WA in heritage, at PDCs, in policy development, governance. And so we need people to, realise that and come into the system. So that's our EOI that we put out last year. And we had a successful applicant who began with us in June, worked through the 150 flexible hours. And they were lucky enough to be able to attend on-country field trips, had a chance to attend some of the training sessions. And it was really great because when a research assistant position came up later in the year, we actually encouraged Riley, and I've checked with Riley and she's fine with me talking about her, to apply. And, she was successful and that was really lucky for us. So I really feel that the internship did exactly what it was supposed to do. It kind of exposed someone to native title, what was happening in the industry. They came in and did the internship, a position came up, They applied, successful, and now she's a member of the team. So that's really great. We are going to be running it again this year, and Curtin are also now looking into the possibility of offering credit for that internship as well. So that I think will encourage more people maybe to get on board. But I think that's really great of Curtin as well, because it just means that it will increase people's interest in it, and also means that, if people do an internship, we might have to change around what it looks like, but they can get credit for their courses and they can actually focus on the internship for a period of time rather than having to worry about, doing assignments and all sorts of things for another unit. So what next? It's obviously really important to keep promoting that there are rewarding career paths for those who study anthropology. Possible presentations to third-year anthropology students at Curtin University. So that's something that I've been in talks with them about talking about, what are the career paths and, why you should study anthropology, because obviously it's awesome, as I've said at home. And looking at similar archaeology internships through UWA for the heritage team as well. And actually, again, just, randomly got an email yesterday about that opportunity. And so we're looking into how we can do that for the archaeologists in the heritage team. And that's me. Thanks.